Hello, friends. So, I want to share hopefully a short reflection as I'm having to walk out here in the rain, which is quite peaceful and life giving. Been able to have a time of listening and of praying, so it was very rich. So, we can say that this is our second reflection in the second week of Lent, and we talked a little bit last week about what Lent is, but I'll leave that, deeper dive and search up to you. What I want to share about today is about listening to the voice of God. And if many of us who have been in the church or grew up in the church, or like me, came to church at 18. I'm in 41 now, which is weird, but I'm grateful. One of the challenges for us who've been, in the church space, there's many blessings, of course. But in those blessings, some of those challenges, some of those sometimes become challenges, and meaning that we sometimes don't develop practices to listening to the voice of God, and we over-identify the Bible and Scripture with the only way God speaks. So bear with me right here. John chapter 2, 13. Verse 13 to 25, you guys can take some time to read that alongside this reflection. Jesus goes up to Jerusalem, and he finds that the temple has become a market. And, the temple rituals and laws required sacrifices of animals, and obviously people are coming from different nations. So this practice of gratitude, sacrifice, worship becomes a business for those around the temple and in the temple. And so obviously if you have to purchase an animal, but you can't purchase it with foreign money, so there's an opportunity now to sell and to exchange. And as Jesus walks in for the first time, he's in Jerusalem in the Gospel of John. So little side note here, in John, he's at the temple. He's in Jerusalem 3 different times, whereas in the other Gospels the whole journey is towards Jerusalem. But in John, there's a going to Jerusalem, going away to Jerusalem, back and forth. Anyway, you can get into that later. This may not be that short then, huh? Anyhow, he turns their tables, and it's obvious that what God designed, created the temple to be, it's no longer that. It's no longer a place of worship, of invitation, of knowing God. It's now a place where people's hopes and desires and commitments in their religion, faith, culture are being taken advantage of. And so it seems to have lost, in that setting, what it was intended for. So Jesus flips their tables. And so then he's asked, hey, give us a sign, which kind of a little bit of foreshadow. He's going to give us many signs, 7 signs specifically. One actually took place right before at the wedding. So we'll see 6 more signs. The 7th one being the resurrection of Lazarus, for which he's ultimately It's ultimately decided to kill him and Lazarus because they want to just shut him down, which speaks to the desires of those, in control of that system, where they are worshiping themselves, their position, more than God. So all of that is taking place. All right, we did all that little legwork to get to this. Jesus says, destroy this temple. I will raise it up in 3 days. And he lets us know he's talking about himself. And then it says, here's where the voice of God comes in. It says that the disciples, after he was raised, they remember what he had said. They believed the scriptures, keep that, and what Jesus said. So they believed the scriptures after encounter with the resurrected Lord and what he had said. And I don't think that they were doubting the scriptures. And here's some scientific proof. Now you should believe because here I am raised from the dead. No, I think what is happening, someone's moving their trash can, I'm going to return, is that there was a dominant interpretation of what the scriptures were saying. But their gut feeling seems to be from the beginning like, no, I don't know if the temple's getting it right. And so they hear John the Baptist is like, yes, that makes more sense. That describes more who God is. But they're still not totally sure. And so they're guided to Jesus. They follow Jesus, hear Jesus, learn from Jesus, are taught by him. And he raises from the dead and he encounters them. So what does all this mean? It may mean here that we got to find ways to listen to the voice of God and not just rely on the scriptures. Okay. I don't mean by saying that we're going to hear some voice and some feeling and it's going to come from within us. And no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I think we read the Gospels with predetermined answers. And I think that many of us actually have not read the Gospels in a long time, but we think we have. Or when we try to read them, we get bored because we kind of already know what it's going to say. We already have predetermined answers. And it takes us back to our college days where last minute you're trying to put together a lesson and here's this parable. Where we've been so rushed in our Christianity that we have not taken time to slow down and listen to God. Where the performance-oriented culture of our society, of some of our ministries, puts us in a position where we've created habits where we to draw things out of scripture, to teach them, to say them, but not listen. And that's what I mean by, how do we listen to the voice of God? I think if we slow down in our reading, and if we commit to one gospel for a long period of time, we maybe purchase some commentaries to read alongside, and we do some slow reading. What I mean by that is, what would it look like to read one gospel for 1 year? That doesn't mean you're not going to read other things, but your primary study is going to be a gospel. So, right now, verse 13 in chapter 2 to verse 25, what if you stay there for a while? What if you look at other commentaries, what it means? Before you know it, 2 months have passed by and you've got some really good encounters with God and possibly hear the voice of God that makes the scriptures come alive, and you believe them in new ways, in more relevant ways, and you're inspired. So when they encounter Jesus, they look back on the things that Jesus was doing and saying, and they realize something new. Hey, we've been around the church for a while. That's great. That doesn't mean we should burn out. That doesn't mean we should burn it down. It doesn't mean we should leave it. I think it means let's find new ways to allow Jesus to flip our tables. That we are not here to consume, but to follow. And that God does not want us first and foremost to be, productive or performative, but to be formed. And so this is not about performance, but spiritual formation. One last thought. Jesus says, zeal for your house will consume me. And maybe this is an example of slowing down and reading. We're reading the Gospel of John now for a year and a half. And I'm still in awe and learning, and sometimes overwhelmed, and sometimes inspired. But anyway, just a side note. So when Jesus says, zeal for your house will consume me, I've always heard that as, Jesus is upset, he's angry, he's looking at this place, and it's like, how dare you? I'm zealous for God. Come on, brothers. You know that stuff. But the zeal for his house will consume me. What happens to Jesus? He's killed by who? By the zealous, stubborn leadership of the temple. So it may not be describing the zeal of God. It may be describing the human wrath. And so that leads me to think about the cross in new ways. That Jesus isn't being punished by the Father at the cross. There's actually very little evidence of that, if any, in the Gospels. But he is being punished by the human wrath. That the betrayal of Judas, I have a lot to do with that. The not wanting to seize control of the temple, I have a lot to do with that. I can make those connections to my life. And so Jesus suffers the wrath of human betrayal. It consumes him. But surprise, he does not retaliate with violence, but he surrenders because his desire is to save the world and not condemn the world. And so we can be humbled by that love and be surrendered and answer the questions in the post-resurrection. Do you love me? Do you love me?